Welcome to the Hecht Report number 5. We're here at the New with a nice intimate gathering with a Venus flytrap in the middle of the table. We're talking about offline, who do you listen to, what news and podcasts and media, but I think the truth is here with the Hecht Report. So Michael, welcome.
A version of it.
Let's learn. Let's go direct in, and the election was 2 weeks ago. Give us the tea leaves. What does this mean? The election, specifically, non-political conversation, but what does this mean for New Orleans, Louisiana?
Objectively, non-politically, it's at least for the next 2 years, it's on balance very good. Because if you start at the top, locally, Landry is on a telephone call basis with Trump, so that's very advantageous. Mike Johnson is one of the most powerful people in the universe, and that's very advantageous. You might have seen the news report that came out today on NOLA.com that there's going to be a large, by large I mean like multi-billion dollar AI center that Meta's putting up near Shreveport. I don't know, it could just be total coincidence that Mike Johnson's from Shreveport, or if you don't believe in coincidences because you're, conspiracies in, it could be because there's some political, at least correlation, if not causation.
Yep.
Scalise is still very, very powerful. And on the Dem side, and the Democrats are going to definitely take back the House in 2 years because that's how this thing goes. Troy Carter is going to be one of the most senior people, certainly in black leadership, right behind Hakeem Jeffries. So we're politically, and Kennedy is very much in there now as well. So we're, and I think you might see Garrett Graves have a comeback in this administration.
Like any state, we seem to be as well positioned.
We are super over-indexed for a pissant 5 million person, 4.6 million person state. So politically, it's very good. In terms of the all of the above energy approach, that obviously favors Louisiana very much. Oil and gas, natural gas. I think there's a little bit of a question about what Trump's going to do on offshore wind, which is a wait and see kind of thing, because for Louisiana, being the manufacturing hub for offshore wind is a big opportunity, building the ships and building the turbines. But generally, Trump is going to be a very pro-energy president, and that's a good thing. I think one of the biggest boons for Louisiana is going to be in permitting. The past regime has been excruciatingly slow and often contradictory in permitting, including for clean energy projects like carbon capture projects or hydrogen projects. One thing we saw in Trump 1.0, and I think now that you've got Doge or whatever Musk and Vivek are running, I definitely don't want to be like in the middle seat on them on an airplane. The government's going to be a lot faster. Maybe not always to good, but in terms of permitting and getting projects done, whether traditional or clean energy, that's going to go a lot faster, and that's a really good thing. Probably the biggest negative potentially is going to be that this is going to be a more protectionist, mercantile, almost pre-World War II type of Republican or type of government. And to the degree that trade with China particularly is suppressed by tariffs, that's not great for our ports. But at the end of the day, I'm just not sure how big of an impact that has, particularly considering that our ports, which is not usually a good thing, but we're export heavy, we're imbalanced. Because we don't have the population and because we didn't have the right container port for the last few years, we send out 60% of the country's natural gas. We send out 90% of its agriculture comes through our ports, soy, corn, wheat, but we're not importing a ton of stuff from China. So I don't know how negative, but I would call that one out as a potential negative, is if there's a suppression on trade, that's not good for us. Otherwise, it's really, who knows? It's just going to be like a may you live an interesting time couple of years for Louisiana and for the country and for the world. And so the best thing that we can be is flexible and well rested.
Would this affect the mayor's election in the next couple of years in any way?
I think that if Harris had won, it would have been a boost for
Yep.
Helena
Yep.
because they're very close. Now, the only way that I think it would affect is there might be even more. There might be a bit of maybe some type of knee jerk away because if Landry is going to be closer to the administration, maybe more of a progressive push locally. But I just don't. I think local issues are local issues, and I think that even if Harris had won, I just don't know how much of a difference it would have made in the election because local people are voting on
Potholes.
Potholes, police, and I don't know, public schools, the 3 Ps. I don't know, but yeah.
So I think you're sitting around the table with more technology, entrepreneurial folks.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the ball going there? Where does all this mean for innovation, technology? You mentioned AI.
Well, Elon Musk seems to be the vice president, or as Maureen Dowd called him, Elania. And it's really funny, isn't it? It's hilarious. And the only question is like, at what point does like the president just get tired of him? Like, be like, I just want to be alone.
Yeah.
I want to be alone. So I don't. Yeah, it's actually really interesting because like J.D. Vance has been an outspoken supporter of Khan, who's the FTC person under Biden, who's been antitrust and wants to break up big tech. Elon is obviously very pro AI with XAI, and so I don't know. I mean, Silicon Valley is really split right now, right? You've got the Peter Thiels of the world on one side, and then you've got the kind of who's the old Twitter guy, the Jack Dorsey. It's going to be a good time for tech. So one, we have the announcement, which has now been broken in the paper, so we can talk about it a little bit, which is coming out. That's going to be massive.
Let's say that again. So there's an AI distribution center?
It's in the paper today. No, a data center.
Data center.
Multi-billion-dollar that's going to be announced up in Shreveport. So that means that we're getting into that game. And the way I can compare it, and I think this is a fair comparison, is back in the 80s, Governor Foster was afraid of flying. And so instead of going over and meeting with Mr. Toyota or with BMW, he just rode around on his motorcycle and got a law degree. This is true. So as a result, Louisiana is the only southern state with no automotive industry, which hurts. It's why we're not going to build EVs. It's why we're building like the polymers for batteries and not the crud, because you're still building EVs where you're building combustion vehicles. So we suffered for a generation because we didn't get in front of that train. So the fact that we're getting in the AI data center game feels really smart, and it's going to be and it also shows where the administration is on tech. Josh Flagg, who's at the state right now, used to be with us, is a big booster.
Director of Innovation, new position. Susan Bonnet Bourgeois, who runs LED, is very pro DM. I think you're going to see digital media comes out of this session okay. It's going to be protected. So I feel like I'm feeling more optimistic about tech in Louisiana than I have in a long time, because I feel like in the past administration it wasn't necessarily understood, right, or liked. Whereas I think in this administration, particularly with Josh as the evangelist and others around him supporting him, we're kind of back in the game. And we've had the scare now with DM. We've gotten through that. So I'm feeling, a 6.5 out of 7 out of 10 on that. And can you go a little deeper with what's going on with the digital media tax credits, under the film tax credits? There's been a lot of...
Well, it's not, they're trying to amend it. As we speak, the bill is being amended in the Senate, but the current posture is that digital media will survive with an annual cap, which is irrelevant relative to usage, where film will survive with a cap much greater than digital media, but which is fine given film usage, and historic tax credit, which is critical for
taking zombie buildings and putting them back into commerce will survive with an annual cap that should be workable. So, it's going to the tax reform is going to end up being incremental instead of revolutionary, which is probably the only thing you could ever have happen.
And will they still have some money set aside, LED, for investments? Was that sort of the...
Yeah, part of the plan is that some of the basic programs like quality jobs would get scrapped and exchanged for a new program under LED, and I think that's going to happen. So, I can say without reservation that we have a level of energy and competence in economic development in this state that we've not had in a long time. And part of it is that you've got a governor who is super aggressive, super transactional, and just wants to win. And it's not really ideological. It's like he wants to put skins on the wall, right? And then you've got an LED secretary who's not a politician and not an economic developer, and those are both two huge pluses. And then you've got like 1/3 of Gino Inc. working at LED, so that's good, I think.
You said something on Newell, and maybe help me connect the dots, AI and energy.
Yeah.
So go deeper in that. Why is the AI revolution good for an energy state?
Well, and y'all tell me if this is right. So the stat that I heard, which stuck with me, is that an AI search or a Chat GPT search specifically takes 17 times the energy of a Google search, and which sounds about right.
I don't know the exact number, but it's monumental.
It's a magnitude different, right? And so what that means, as AI gets integrated into your toothbrush and everything else, the energy demands are going to go through the roof. And then you add to that electrification, population growth, and it's clear that energy usage is going to be going, that way, if not exponential. And then when you combine that, I don't think that even under more conservative regimes, I don't think that the drive or the pressure for a lower carbon future is going to go away. It just doesn't feel that generationally or existentially it's going to go away. It might ebb or flow, but there's going to be regulatory, consumer, and in varying ways political pressure to lower carbon emissions. So whoever can master more energy with lower carbon is going to do really well. And it feels like Louisiana, for a couple of reasons, is really well positioned, or many reasons. So one is carbon capture, which is the easy bridge technology now. It's our experience in our geology particularly. We have these layers of clay that make it really good for sequestering. So we're good on that. Nuclear is a favor of this governor, and I think of Trump as really the only way you can really, really be clean at scale. And so like they're bringing back 3 Mile Island, right, out on Long Island, which like almost blew up back in the 70s, right? Like it's, I think Germany realized that they made a mistake. So nuclear, I think, is a part of it. But then if you look at the other forms of energy in Louisiana that we're good at bio-waste into fuel, wood pellets, bagasse. We're making jet fuel from tires. I know I'm getting away from the AI question.
Yeah.
But it's getting
way far. You're in the bagasse.
Yeah, I'm in the bagasse. I just wanted to say bagasse. Can I tell you what we're doing?
Yeah.
Sorry, look,
Please.
it's a squirrel. So we got permission from Juvenile. So for everybody who's been helping us with the Super Bowl preparations, we're doing T-shirts that say Summer of Infrastructure. We want to say Summer of Super Bowl, but the NFL would sue us. So we're doing Summer of Infrastructure, and it's got a picture of Juvie on it from like 400 degrees. And then the back says, "We back that asphalt." And it's got bling on it. It's got fire and diamonds. Yeah, it's Sierra's doing it.
All right,
so.
with that segue, bagasse to Juvie, I like it.
Yeah.
Super Bowl, you've been busy. So we're now T-minus
83 days.
83 days. Give us an update. Where are we in the Super Bowl? Is it going to work?
So we are. It's pretty. If you think about this if you guys have ever done construction with like a deadline, we're like, on one hand we're 83 days away, but on the other hand we're like 14 days away, because anything that doesn't start by basically the end of the month, by Thanksgiving or by the end of the month, it's not going to be done by February, February 9th. So like right now is like crunch time. So, there's like more yelling, more F-bombs, more veiled than real threats happening now, because now is the time. But overall, the level of cooperation and ability and just effectiveness that we found at the city, at the state, at Sewer and Water Board, at the nonprofits has been amazing. So we're going to get, as of right now, there's no project that we're trying to get done that's at risk. So the French Quarter, Bow Brothers is starting this week on redoing the streets of the French Quarter. We're doing the sidewalks. We have a $2 million contract to replace all the lights. We're putting cafe lights in the alleys. We got signs printed, so you'll actually have street signs in the French Quarter for the first time in our lifetime. The contract's going to get that put up. There's been some issue now with the garbage contract, so we have to manage that. We'll deal with that. We have a project called the French Doors Project, where we're redoing the 100 blocks of everything from Decatur to Dauphine. Because like the weird thing is that in the French Quarter, the first block is not considered the French Quarter. So like Royal Street's a beautiful street with expensive, nice stores, but the first block is ratchet. It has a bodega on it that's a drug center. We're doing beautification, facade improvements, lighting. We're putting a police substation on the first block of Charters. I was talking to the new owner of Crystal Burger because somebody had to buy it, and he was so excited because he's done all these renovations. Now he's getting money for a new sign. So, if you have to make a bad life decision, you can do it now in a better environment. If I want to talk about the areas that are a concern right now, the homeless situation is one that is going to take continued pressure on it because we lost 4 to 6 months because there was a disagreement between Unity, which is kind of like gets all the money from the government, and the city. And so like the pumps were turned off for 4 months, 6 months while it kept raining. But now we're in a push to clean up the last encampment by Thanksgiving in Bayou Classic, so 2 weeks.
And there's a guy in charge of that. He's doing a good job.
Well, there's one of the problems is that it's a bit of a leaderless system. So the guy from the city, Nate Fields, is incredible. He's kind of messianic.
Yep.
But he hasn't gotten the support he needs in any way from the city, from partners. And the current model that's being used is called Housing First. And it's a model that is slow. It's effective, but it's slow and expensive, because basically what it means is that if there's an individual who is homeless, then you get to know them, gain their trust. Then you have to go and find a landlord who is going to take a voucher from Unity to put them up at the cost of $2,000 a month. Well, not just that, $2,000 is everything. It's food and medicine and everything. So then you take the individual and you go and show them 3 potential homes. And if they don't like any of the 3, then you have to discuss alternatives. So you can imagine, like, this is a slow process when it's working. So when it administratively breaks down, like, it just backs up. So the governor has gotten involved in that, and I think I personally feel like that's a good thing, because if you look around the country, this Housing First model, which has been the model of the past 8 years, or 4 years at least, you can just go to a place like San Francisco or Seattle or Houston, and you can ask whether it's working, right? So the homeless situation is getting better, but it's a concern. What else? We're coming up with a new plan with the RTA to deal with transportation. The airport is putting in some new plans for rideshare. So what they're going to do is take Uber and Lyft, and instead of being picked up on that inside of the circle, which is not big enough, they're going to take over the first floor of the short-term parking. So it'll be like in the real world where you go to a place and it's like Tim Williamson, you have to go to Corral A, and that's where you get your Uber or your Lyft. So that'll take from 15 spaces per provider to 75, so that'll be better. One of the things I'm most excited about is all the murals that are going up. So we've got
B. Mike is going to be putting a massive mural on the side of the garage above Duncan Plaza. That's getting primed right now. Let's see, Crew to New is paying for Shep Ferry, who is the guy who did the Obama Hope poster. He's going to be putting up a massive mural on the side of the Marriott on Charters that curves around a canal. We're going to be putting a big mural, I hope, from a local artist woman named Jade Myers on the side of the ferry terminal down by at the foot of Canal. There's a competition going on now for the entrance on Girard Street entrance. We've got a bunch of other ones that are going up. We want to put our murals on the side of the courthouse, which is 4 panels there. So those will be fun because those are permanent improvements. So the Super Bowl, the good thing is that it's been really productive, and we're doing 10 years of deferred maintenance and beautification in 6 months. The bad news, or the part that's depressing or dispiriting, is that I thought going into this that there'd be really big challenges of capacity or of money or of attitude, and none of those exist. There's more than enough money, there's more than enough capacity, and everybody wants to do a good job. It just required bringing people together and just giving people permission to do the work.
And last time you said people want to do the work and the system's in place. So after the Super Bowl, there's a roadmap.
Right. So we had a board retreat last week, and we discussed the day after, because the day after, is going to be like day of beauty and hangover, right? Because the Super Bowl week is going to be super intense. But the GNO Inc. board, including members from St. Tammany and Tangipahoa and St. James and Plaquemines, everybody agrees that the role that we're playing as this kind of unofficial, without portfolio and without power ombudsman, that they want us to continue, because everybody recognizes, including the governor, that a functional New Orleans is good for the whole state. And also, at like a selfish level, if you live in like Mandeville or Bellchase or wherever, you want to be able to go into the Quarter to get dinner or to listen to music. Like, nobody wants to not be in the Quarter, but people have stayed away for years because it's nasty. So they want us to keep this up. So we want to keep it up. Sorry, this is a good podcast moment. So I was talking to Terrence Osborne, who we're trying to figure out a way to get him to do a poster for the Super Bowl like he does for the Jazz Fest. And I was talking to him about this weird experience of the Super Bowl where we've been able to get a lot done without any official power at all. In fact, when I was talking to Mitch about it, he said, Michael, how are you going to get this done? You have all the responsibility and no authority. I said, I don't know, charm and dad jokes. We're just going to make it through. And so I said to Terrence, I said, I think that what I've discovered in this is the power of powerlessness. And I didn't know that Terrence is actually a Buddhist. And he said, oh, you've discovered the power of Wu. And I'm like, what's Wu? He's like, oh, the way of the Wu. I'm like, what is that? That sounds really interesting. He's like, well, Wu is the Buddhist expression. It's a Chinese term for emptiness. And of course, a lot of Buddhism is about that, that self-effacement. But basically, it's the idea that you create power and meaning by giving it all up. And it's one of those Buddhist paradoxy things. But anyway, so we've discovered the way of the Wu, which is that by being in these situations with no formal power, it actually gives us a lot of soft power because, frankly, we can't threaten anybody. We can only be there for the good. Like, you can ignore us, but we're like a wedding planner or a closet organizer. Like, we're just here to make it better. And that makes it very easy for people to come to the table because there's no power dynamic because we have no power. And ironically, that gives us a lot of power. So it's the way of the Wu.
So do the Wu.
Yeah, do the Wu. It's very interesting. So that's
So Taylor did $500 million of economic impact.
No, much more. No, she did $500 million. That's right.
Super Bowl will match, less, more?
Both. So Taylor Swift, she sold 65,000 tickets times 3, right? Which is like what, 200,000 or something plus, at an average ticket price of
a lot,
$1,500, $2,000, right? Matt Wolf on our staff bought 4 tickets for $4,000. I shouldn't say this on the podcast, listened by millions, but resold it for $17,000. Right? Then he went to Jamaica. Right? Right. Thank you. And so
Should have done that.
yeah. But the thing about Taylor Swift, so Taylor Swift had immense immediate impact because people spent a lot of money. They also spent a lot of money at restaurants and shops, and they tipped like crazy because it was like being on a ski vacation. Like once you spend $5,000 on 3 tickets, you're rounding up to like, when you buy 2 drinks for like $12, you're rounding up to 20. You're like, we're rolling tonight. We are missing a mortgage payment, honey.
Yeah.
Right? And it'll have an afterglow because people will come back to New Orleans because they had such a good time. But if you think about the Super Bowl, it's smaller as an immediate impact because you have 75,000 people coming to the game, and maybe double that, or 1 times more of that coming in just to be hangers on. So let's say you have 150,000 people who are here. So that's a smaller immediate impact because they're probably spending less money. They're going to events that they've already, it's more contained, right? But you have 6,000 press here. We've already been talking to the foreign press. You've got 200 million people watching worldwide. So the NPV from the indirect or the induced or the afterglow is much, much bigger from the Super Bowl. So if we have a good Super Bowl, we're selling the next Super Bowl, we're selling the next convention, we're selling the next tourist. It's much more like the Paris Olympics, where it's incalculable how many millions of people will go to Paris now because of the Olympics. So that's why. So Taylor Swift was more acute, but the Super Bowl, if we do it well, is worth every penny that we put into it. And it'll end up costing us, I don't know, it's hard to put a number on the price tag because like all the work that we're doing now for the infrastructure, which might be $60 million worth of total work, it all had to be done anyway. It's all deferred maintenance, almost all of it, most of it.
So it's an investment in the city.
Yeah, and look, and a lot of it, so we have 3 goals for the work. So one is to have a good Super Bowl where we don't get embarrassed. The second is to do work that's going to benefit New Orleanians for a long time afterwards. And what's illustrative of that is that a lot of the work that we're repairing was last done in 1984 for the World's Fair. So stuff can last for 40 years, it falls apart, but it lasts. And then the third thing is that this is an audition to the world on the 20th anniversary of Katrina, right? Because next year is the 20-year anniversary year, to say that New Orleans is back, we're better than ever, and our story is going to be one of public safety, where we're number 4 fastest improving in the country, despite the disaster of this past weekend. We're in infrastructure, and we have to say this bluntly: if Katrina hit us tomorrow, we would be bone dry. Because in fact, Ida was bigger, right? The issue was that we had an engineering disaster for Katrina because all the outfall canals became infall canals, and the Mr. Go became, backed up. But we're over-engineered for safety on surge. Now, rainwater is still an issue, but when people consider Katrina, they're thinking of the lower 9, which was, flood water. And then we want to talk about energy and aerospace and the new port we're building, and just basically describe ourselves as safe and accessible, but also something more than just, Bourbon Street. So.
And let's shift to innovation and entrepreneurship. You mentioned Josh Flagg, the director of innovation.
Flegg rhymes with leg.
Flegg. Jeff Flegg.
You actually pronounced it right, but he's been mispronounced for so long.
He's first.
Dumonet.
One of the first positions of the director of innovation. So his job is to focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. That's good.
Right.
The SSBDCI money theoretically is allocated.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on. I got to find out.
So
that's remained frustrating to me.
Theoretically allocated. You've got universities involved. What's your observation of the ecosystem support and where innovation and entrepreneurship's going?
I don't know. I mean, like we've talked about this. I feel like it goes in waves, and I feel like there was the last peak was back in, when were all the exits back in 2019, right? And then there was an ebb, but like everything ebbed because COVID just killed everything.
And now it feels like we are coming back because of the renewed focus, because of this announcement we're going to have up in Shreveport. I love the fact that the state's back in the innovation game. I think that's incredibly important because any state that's done well over time, whether it's Texas or North Carolina, it's been because the feds and or the state have really been invested. Like as much work as we do locally, we can't do it without the state or the feds. We don't have the horsepower, the firepower. So I'm feeling good. I feel that in general, New Orleans is back on. A couple of years ago, things were. I mean, you remember you saw me running at Tulane, right? And you're like, "How's it going?" And I was like, "It sucks." And that upset you because you're like, "I've never seen Michael pessimistic."
Yeah, that was the bottom of the crime. That was we're at the bottom of the crime site.
We were in the crapper.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're definitely on the upswing from that. Along, the measures that are not sexy, like infrastructure and crime, and the stuff that's sexy. I mean, the Taylor Swift weekend was a bit of a revelation. It was much bigger and more than I think we thought it was going to be.
I've got a couple more things, but who has a question here? Anybody have thoughts, questions, comments?
I got one. You've talked a long time about branding and rebranding for New Orleans. What are you doing as it pertains to the approach of the Super Bowl to further that mission?
So, a lot of the immediate messaging about the Super Bowl is more focused on getting the next Super Bowl. It's about built to host, and it's what we do. The two ways that we're really trying to get involved in messaging is that we're going to have economic development messaging all around town with scannable signs that talk about things like advanced manufacturing or tech or trade, just to try to put up messages that are a little bit broader. But I think that the message that's going to come out of the Super Bowl is going to be one of competence and culture, or culture and competence. The culture message is inevitable because it's just the cliche. And people love it, and people love it now more than ever because all the world's become Dallas, right? Which Juan Kim's not going to save with his steakhouse. Leave that in.
You saw their roof fell, a piece of the roof fell off the Texas stadium.
See, I'm not sad.
Can't build a stadium.
But I think what I really want to come through from our standpoint, what we control, is the competence. I want the infrastructure to look great. I want the French Quarter to look and smell great. I want the roads to be like a baby's ass. I want the lights to all be on and be all the same intensity. I want the airport. The airport looks great. I want it to function great. What we want people to see is a city that's not only one of the most culturally rich and human cities in the country and the world, but one that's also functional. And I think if we can convey that, that'll be an incredibly important kind of quiet message that it's a bit of like what Charleston's been able to convey, but without the scale, or like Nashville's able to convey, but it's kind of more boring.
It feels like credibility.
Yeah, it's credibility.
I mean, like we build some credibility.
That's actually a good word. I agree with you, credibility.
We're not just fun and cool and happy.
No, it's like what I always say. You want New Orleans to be the city that people want to not just date, but marry. Right? I mean, for too long, we've been like that place that you go to either before or after you get serious. And we want to be like, we want to be marriage material. Like, we could be like, a lady in the club, but a freak in the bed. But like, leave that in. But that's a lyric, right?
I think that's the tagline.
That's a lyric, right? That's ludicrous, right?
Ludicrous, yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, any other questions?
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
It's a simple question. How are you going to continue that woo wave and keep riding it after the Super Bowl? So you've got all this inertia, this momentum.
Right.
Will the governor still be behind keeping New Orleans on this upward trajectory?
Right. So it's a great question. How do we maintain the woo? So part of it is that I expect the governor to continue his support of New Orleans because it's both politically and practically the right thing to do. I don't think that's going to change. I think that without the Super Bowl as a forcing function, we're going to have to determine the next thing, which will be Mardi Gras. And then after that, it'll be Jazz Fest. After that, it'll be Essence. You kind of always need that thing to be anchoring on to create that pressure. And I've already talked to the city and Joe Threat, we're going to do that. So, and then I think the last thing is, to your point, Tim, there's a credibility element. I think the fact that GNO Inc. has established some level of trust of our intentions and our ability, and then we're winning and people like to win. Like, it's fun to go to work when you're actually getting praised and not just getting crapped upon. So I think, at least to the end of this administration, we expect to be able to keep this up.
Maybe a little bit off the wall, but I was wondering, one of the things Trump said was that he wanted to move jobs out of D.C. across America. You see any places that maybe Louisiana can target, maybe like FEMA, or like, is there any agencies or type of jobs that we can?
No, it's a great question. So we haven't talked about that, but to your point, man, we seem to be the right place to put FEMA. Right? I mean, it's like I've always said, like
Is that an announcement?
No, I mean, no, but he did. Trump did say that it's part of his idea of dismantling the bureaucratic state. I'm not sure it really makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, but not being said, from a brand standpoint, the opportunity to me always seemed to be us pivoting from being the victims of disaster to the masters of disaster, and taking over FEMA. That's interesting. Yeah, some organizations like the EDA are already regional. They've got a headquarters, but they are regional. So, yeah.
One final question. I think we ask this every time. 5 years from now, where are we now? What is the vision of New Orleans, Louisiana, assuming all this works? What do you see? What city do you see now?
I think that if all this works the way I think it will, then in 5 years, our challenges are growth challenges about zoning, about traffic, debates about gentrification, about job access. I mean, you're as a city, you're going to have one of two sets of discussions: either stagnation or growth/gentrification. Like there is no
Happy medium.
What do you call it in physics? There's no stasis. There's no stability. No, the one where you're actually stable, there is none. You're either going one way or the other. Like Richard Campanella says, you're in a bicycle that's moving and stable and dealing with like speed issues, or you stop moving and you wobble and fall over. And so I think that we're on a path to having speed issues because the quality of life here is still like people. I was on Canadian broadcasting because Toronto saw what happened here for Taylor Swift, and they were like, tell us about it. Like, what do we need to do? You guys were so dope. And so I think that we can become that model of how we balance culture and commerce in a human package.
Drop the mic. Any final words?
That was your final word.
That was a final word.
That was a final word.
Michael, thank you very much. Incredible
Terry.
words. We will ride the Woo wave, right?
Dude, the way he told me that, I'm like, that's a thing.
All right, thank you.